To tell us about this and much more is our great friend over in London herself, Esther Krakue. Esther, great to see you. Thanks for staying up late on a Saturday night. I'm sure you've turned down a dozen different dates and all sorts of things to be with us, but that's their loss and our gain, and our viewers' gain. Tell us what happened in Uxbridge and Ruislip.
So in Uxbridge, the by-election was a surprise victory for the Tories, but only by a razor-thin margin. Now, we have to remember that Uxbridge is a very safe Conservative seat, so much so that was Boris Johnson's seat, who was the Prime Minister. Now, there's an unwritten rule in politics that really you want your cabinet ministers and sort of the higher-ranking figures in your party to be in very, very safe seats, so that there's no risk of them losing a by-election or completely destabilizing your government or the upper echelons of the party. So Uxbridge was very, very blue. And I live near Uxbridge, I can confirm that. But the fact that the Tories nearly lost the seat by a very slim margin shows how much dissatisfaction there is with the Tories. But it also shows that still it's swayed in the direction of the Conservatives, because the local residents of Uxbridge are apparently very irate by the London Mayor Sadiq Khan's plan to extend the ULEZ to the outskirts of London, which would mean that people driving certain types of cars that are produced before a certain date would have to pay £15 extra to enter into a certain protected zone. So imagine, an old lady going to church 2 miles down the road, she might have to pay £15 per day just to be able to do that.
And just to make it clear, Esther, I'll just interrupt you there just for our viewers. ULEZ, U-L-E-Z, ULEZ is the ultra-low emissions zone. And this is cars have to either be electric vehicles or have certain emissions and so on. And so they were going to... London Mayor was going to introduce this into that area, and they've gone, no way, and that's why they vote. Both Tories and Labour agree that that's why the election was lost. So, sorry, Esther, carry on.
Well, actually, it's funny that the London Mayor is currently in court contesting this, because there are many politicians that are questioning the legality of this. Does the London Mayor have the jurisdiction to extend this policy, this tax effectively to the outskirts of London, which really kind of fall outside of his jurisdiction anyway? So he's contesting that in court currently, but people are very angry about it, particularly working class individuals. Now, what people try in certain spaces try and make this issue, a very Tory, very blue, very middle class issue, but really it tends to affect the people on the lowest incomes. I mean, of course, £15 a day just to enter into an area. I mean, that's effectively a tax. So if you're a plumber, if you work in construction, if you have a mobile business, for instance, that really is going to be a hefty cost to your business. And these are the kinds of conversations that we really should be having. But David Frost is right. The Tories need to find something that would actually appeal to voters, because at the end of the day, they don't seem very different to the Labour Party at the moment. We have the highest tax burden since the Second World War. Infrastructure and progress has ground, and productivity has ground to a halt. Our debt is sky high. There are legitimate conversations to be had, and it's not really fair to be saddling the British public with even more, financial burdens like the ULEZ and net zero targets.
Rita. Well, you've got the Tories winning in a landslide at the last election with Boris, riding high on Brexit. And yet, like you said, they were essentially the Labour Party in government. They are the Labour Party in government. They've embraced net zero. They're high taxing. Is there going to be a genuine choice at the next election for the British people? Is there a Conservative option? Or are we going to have Labour and Labour light?
Well, unfortunately, it seems like the closest thing that comes to even a Conservative option is reform, which is quickly scooping up sections of the stronger blue areas in the country. But the reality is there's really no differentiation, or very little differentiation, between the Tories and the Labour Party at the moment. There's very little wiggle room. Keir Starmer has been receiving a lot of flack for refusing to extend sort of child benefits to more than 2 children, which was what the Tories implemented back in the Cameron's government, to cap how many children you can claim government support on. So, it's very difficult to tell the difference between the two. At the end of the day, the rule is you are what you do, not what you say. The Conservatives can say they're Conservatives till they're blue in the face. But really, if you look at some of Blair's years, you could argue that Blair was more conservative than our current Conservative government.
Heaven help us, Esther. James.
Esther, I want to shift gears and talk to this other issue about Nigel Farage, who was essentially had his bank account, his banking privileges suspended by his bank Coots, and it's come out in a document that it wasn't because he'd done anything wrong, it was just that he held the wrong opinions about things like Brexit and so on. Now, this document has come out The head of the bank has apologized, but it seems to me that there needs to be a much stronger stand taken regulatorily against banks that decide that you can't bank with us just because we don't like your politics. What's going on with Nigel, and is there a push to do something to regulate banks to stop this from happening again? Because it could happen to anybody who's out there in the public sphere on any issue.
Yes, well, Nigel would actually agree with you because he is taking a tougher stance on this matter. Originally what we heard from the Coutts Bank was, Nigel Farage is considered in the UK as a PEP, a politically exposed person, and therefore the way that he interacts with financial institutions is different because they have a higher risk of money laundering and getting, money from different accounts, fraud, and all of that. But after, the minutes from a particular meeting, internal meeting by the bank was released on the request of Nigel Farage, who requested his own data that the bank had on him. It was revealed that the minutes from the meeting demonstrated that some of the executives within the bank believed that Nigel Farage didn't have the inclusive values or hold the inclusive values that the bank did, and that he retweeted a few jokes that they found transphobic and obviously Brexit and all of that. And so they decided after he finished paying off his mortgage that they wanted to move him on. Originally, what was so scandalous about this was the BBC was implying that it was because upon having information from Coutts Bank allegedly that he didn't actually have the funds to be part of Coutts Bank. So Coutts Bank is a very elite bank here in the UK. It's the Queen's Bank. You need savings of upwards of £3 million and current accounts figures of I think upwards of £1 million to even be able to bank with them. So it's the wealthy of the wealthy. But apparently, even though Nigel Farage did meet these requirements, his political views didn't. And so the Treasury is now planning on implementing legislation which will force banks to explain why they've closed people's bank accounts, because it's completely unacceptable to be debanked in the 21st century is effectively being unpersoned. You can't exist in the 21st century without a bank account. So this is an extremely serious matter. It's a huge attack on freedom of speech, and the head of the bank has had to apologize to Nigel Farage over this because it's completely scandalous.
Esther Krakue, just wait till they get central bank digital currencies. Wow, what fun the banks will have with us then. Esther, great to chat to you. As always, thanks again so much for staying up so late to chat to us.